Welcome back to the Houndsman XP podcast. Today we have a great show scheduled for you. We have got a very special guest from the West. He's my brother from a Navajo mother because we're both Marines, and so we come from the same birthplace of San Diego, California, at the Marine Corps Recruit Depot. So Calvin Redhouse with Rez Hounds is on the line with Steve and I. And before we get to Calvin, Steve, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Chris. Just doing great down here in the sauna of sunny Florida. We always talk about the weather, it seems, but there isn't much else to talk about in Florida in the summertime. Really excited today. Man, oh man, I've been looking forward to this podcast for a long time. And having done a little hunting out in the West, not for lion, but for bear, I'm really excited about our guest today. Calvin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Steve. How you doing, Chris?
I'm doing great, Calvin. So we're going to jump right into this thing and talk about you and what you're doing out there on the Navajo Nation. And I've been very excited about it as well. I think you and I kind of struck up a relationship off of social media and watching your episodes in Carnivore TV and your involvement there with Gary Robertson and Burnham Brothers game calls and all of that jazz. So, Calvin, just give us a little bit of background about yourself, mainly where you live, and we're going to talk about your outfitting business and some things like that. So, tell us about Calvin Redhouse.
All right. There's not really that much to tell, you know. I grew up on the Navajo reservation.
I know. Hey, Calvin, I know you're being humble, but there's a lot to tell here, and we're gonna try to pry it out of you over the next hour or so.
It's fine with me.
Okay.
Like I said, I grew up on the Navajo reservation. I was born in Fort Defiance, Arizona, and raised in the small town called Wheatfields in Stolen, Arizona. So, and then never, my hunting background only extends as far as 5 years back from today. Growing up on the Navajo reservation, my family never hunted, so I have no knowledge of hunting as far as when I was growing up. Came from a small family, my father, mother, older brother, and younger sister. And that's pretty much, my background.
Well,
I went to...
I'm going to pry a little bit more information out of you here, because even though you're only your hunting history might only go back about 5 years, to a lot of people that may not seem like that long, but you and I have talked about this. How many days a week are you in the mountains with your hounds?
On average, about 5 days a week out of 7 days. I volunteer to work nights as a security officer, so which affords me the opportunity to get off early in the morning, get back to the house, load up the dogs, and head off into the mountains.
Yeah. So you're hunting 5 days a week. It's not like a 1 hour excursion into the mountains. You're in the mountains every day for a long period of time every day, looking for tracks and putting miles and miles and miles on that pack of hounds you're running out there. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, that's about accurate. I get off of work about 7:30. I'm usually in the mountains by 8:30, and from there, depending on the weather or what I'm running the dogs for, either lions or bears or bobcats, either free casting or having them rigged from the truck. But majority of the time, I like to free cast, and just like any houndsman, I enjoy the side of the dogs working and using their nose, Well,
I think the most exciting thing about doing this podcast with you, Calvin, is there's another reason why you've only been involved in hounds for about 5 years, and that's the background story. Podcasts and Houndsman, and these stories are interesting, but we can only talk about dogs so much, which we will certainly do because we want it. That's why we come together is around these hound sports and hound pursuits. But the personal background that you have, I think, is worthy of talking about. And Steve, you're a veteran of the Air Force, and we're all three veterans here. We've all served our country. But Calvin, where have you been prior to 5 years ago? What were you doing?
Well, I graduated high school in 2002, did 2 years of college, and 9/11 happened when I was in high school. I was a senior sitting in history class, and when the Twin Towers was hit, and I went to college here on the Navajo Nation, the community college that we have here for Navajos. And, after that, I just kind of got tired of, going to school and doing homework. So I decided to join the services, and I joined the United States Marine Corps in 2004. And there I served for 10 years, deployed 4 times to Afghanistan, 1 time to Iraq, and in 2015, April of 2015 is when, I decided to not necessarily cut my losses, but decided to, return back home to the Navajo Nation with my family.
Yeah, it was time for a new adventure. After 5 deployments, I can only imagine that you needed some home cooking and see some of that beautiful country on the Navajo Nation for sure.
Yes, sir. I mean, the Navajo Nation is an awesome place. It's very big. A lot of people don't understand. They hear of Native American reservation, and they think of a lot of the reservations that are around, North America, as far as, maybe even being a mile wide. But the Navajo Nation is pretty massive. It's bigger than, I think, 10 states, like West Virginia, Maryland, Hawaii, Massachusetts, Vermont, Connecticut, Delaware. It's bigger than all those states. So, and it is, I believe, it's 17 million acres is what the Navajo Nation is.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. And how many people live on the Navajo Nation?
Well, a little bit over 350,000 Navajos live here on the Navajo reservation, and that, majority of the reservation is on Arizona, but it extends into the southeastern corner of Utah, and then the northwestern corner of New Mexico as well. So it expands into those 3 states.
Yeah, and talk to us a little bit about hunting on the Navajo Nation, and talk to us about your government and how you're set up there, and because I think that's unique. I did not realize until we started talking and I started doing some research that the Navajo Nation is actually that. You've got your own government set up and everything. So talk to us a little bit about that, Calvin.
Okay, yeah. The Navajo Nation, we're a sovereign nation, and we're just like the federal government. We have a, executive, legislative, and traditional government, which consists of 88 council delegates that, represent the Navajo Nation. And in 1868, it was actually called the Navajo Indian Reservation, and then in 1969 is when they changed it to the Navajo Nation. They changed the name, so that's pretty much the background of that. And it's pretty much ran just like the federal government is, as far as our government system.
So your hunting seasons are actually set by the governing body for the Navajo Nation. So they're not set by Arizona, New Mexico, or Utah. It's actually set within your own governing body there on the reservation, correct?
Yeah, we have our own Fish and Wildlife, and they set the dates for us. And the Navajo Nation proclamation is actually out right now, and the deadline for that is coming up close. It ends next week, I believe, on June 7th is when the deadline for all application goes. And it's open to it's open to everybody. The Navajo Nation isn't a closed reservation. Anybody can apply either online, but via mail or walking into the Fish and Wildlife Game office in Window, Arizona, which happens to be the capital of the Navajo Nation.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because I know that I knew that big chunk of property sat out there, but I was always under the impression that you had to be Navajo in order to go there and hunt. But after reading the regulations and talking to you, I mean, what an awesome place. And Steve, you're sending me a message here, and I know you got a question for Calvin, so jump in.
Calvin, when you speak about the Navajo Nation, I believe that probably your ancestors or individuals, perhaps in your family, may have been involved with what we refer to as the code talkers in World War II. Do you know anything about that, or is that in your history?
As far as my history, as far as my family, I'm the first generation to go into the armed services.
I see.
The code talkers, yes, they did play a significant role in the turning events in World War II as far as the island hopping campaigns. But as far as my extent as relations to the Navajo code talkers around here, no, it doesn't. That's not. That doesn't really run in my my bloodline, I guess you could say. But as far as being a devil dog, of course we're all brothers and we're families, and in that source, yeah, I'm related to them. But as far as
there you go,
bloodlines, no.
Oh, it's just interesting to me. I've had the privilege to hunt and to fish on some reservations, Cherokee down in North Carolina, and the White Mountain Apache out in northeast, or I guess that's just eastern Arizona, and but I have not had the privilege yet of hunting on the Navajo Nation, and I certainly hope that's in my future.
I hope so. It's not too bad. The only requirements that that you need is, one, submit your application. Two, if you're born before 1970, you're not required to have a hunter education card. But if you're born after 1970, you have to have a hunter education card from any state. And that's got to be on you at all times with, of course, your permit when you're hunting. And that right there gives you access to the entire 17 million acres to hunt on. Well, depending on what unit you draw. We have 16 units on the Navajo reservation that the Navajo reservation is divided into 16 hunting units. Mountain lions, when you're hunting mountain lions, the entire reservation's open up to you, so you're allowed to hunt wherever you want for mountain lions. And all of those units.
I'm glad you mentioned that about being born before 1970, Calvin, because I'm so old, most states just give me a license. Here in Florida, I don't even have to have one. I can just show my my driver's license.
Yeah. We could do
other than that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying we could do a whole podcast just on the government and the structure of the Navajo Nation. I think what we're going to have to do is, I know that you've got some family that works for Fish and Game. I would really like to talk to them sometime about the Navajo Nation. Of course, my background, 28 years as a fish and wildlife officer in Indiana, a game warden in Indiana. I would really like to know some more information about that. But I want to kind of jump back to the military heritage just for a second before we move on, Calvin, because is the Marine Corps, it seems like a lot of Navajos have made their mark in the United States Marine Corps. Does it seem that it's a cultural thing there, where most of the people from the Navajo Nation enlist in the Marine Corps? Is it pretty evenly distributed to all armed services? Because you have a rich heritage from your people with military service to our country.
Yeah, I think it's right now. Back in the day, it was a little bit, towards the United States Marine Corps. But now in today's generation, it's pretty much even across the entire services. I know a couple of people that, from the hunting community, they're either their kids or their grandkids all went to either the Navy or, as a matter of fact, I have my wife's nephew is at boot camp right now for the Air Force, and he graduates next month on the 16th, I believe, is when he graduates from the Air Force. And,
yeah.
They're headed to San Antonio to see his graduation. So that's where, my mother and father-in-law and some of them are headed next month.
Yeah, I remember those good old days at Lackland Air Force Base. Oh yeah,
yeah. It sounds like the Navajo Nation is the generations coming up are smarter because they're going to places like the Air Force and the Navy. Yeah.
Yeah. People ask me, hey, what services do you think is best? I'm like, well, it depends on what you want. If you want nice housing and be able to live in decent barracks and not 3 hots in a cot, hey, stay away from the Marine Corps and go join either the Navy or the Air Force. You'll pretty much stay off of a cot.
I don't know what it is, but Stephen Pressfield wrote a book called Warrior Ethos, and he talks about how Marines enjoy the hardships because it gives them something to talk about. And I guess we're just gluttons for punishment. I don't know, but I'm glad to hear that some of the younger generation are wising up a little bit and hitting some of these other branches as well. I think we really wanted to focus on your military service and things like that, and I just think it's so important that we pay tribute to our veterans out there. And I know there are several other military veterans that are houndsmen, and your story is pretty unique, Calvin. Growing up on the Navajo Nation, doing your time in the Marine Corps, and then coming back. So, Steve, you had several questions about different hunting stuff, and the thing that brought us together is actually Calvin's outfitting business. And you want to describe that? Give us the name of it, Calvin. Tell us what you're doing out there.
Well, let me give you a little history on how I got started. How about that? Let me
that's
start off with that.
Exactly what we're looking for.
So back in the end of 2014, I was in Lejeune, and I was making my final transition to leave the Marine Corps. And my brother-in-law, who works for Fish and Game here on the Navajo reservation, he was sending me pictures of mountain lions that they had harvested or taken, and that got me interested into hound hunting. He was telling me, he would show me pictures of him and his hound dogs, and him going out on depredation calls for it, and that got me, I was like, wow, that's an adventure. That's something I would want to do after I get out the Marine Corps. So I got a hold of a good friend of mine who is one of my Marines, He was a corporal at the time, and he introduced me to Christopher Mercer there in North Carolina, and he was the guy that I got my walker dogs, my trained walker dogs from there in North Carolina, and I still have them today. You know, you see them in a lot of the videos. It's the only walker dogs that I do have, and so I met Mr. Mercer there, and right off of Lejeune, and he was one of those old houndsmen that didn't really he wasn't in it for the money. You know, he specifically told, the Marine that introduced us, you know, hey, before I sell that guy dogs, you know, I want to meet him, I want to talk to him, I want to see what this guy's about before, you know, I let these dogs go. So I spent about 2 weekends with him, you know, just talking dogs and what my plans were for the dogs that I wanted to buy for him, and that got him interested in it, and that's how I was able to, you know, get two walkers from him. And
so you take them back. You take them back west with you. You take them back to Arizona with you. How'd you get them there?
Yeah.
How did you get your dogs there? Did you drive home?
Yeah, we left Lejeune in April, and me, my wife, my son at the time, and we flew out my mother-in-law just to take a drive. So I packed all of them up and put a U-Haul trailer at the end of the, you know, pulled it on the truck, and with the two puppies in the back and a small kennel, and we drove across country. We drove down to Steve's part of the woods. We went from North Carolina, South Carolina, into Florida, and all the way back across, because we left towards the tail end of winter, so we didn't want to drive, you know, through the storm. So we went down south and came back all the way back to Arizona. We made it like a 5-day trip, which was, you know, the logistical portion of it was kind of painful because we had two puppies, you know, and at the same time we were trying to enjoy our little vacation trip back home. So we stopped in South Carolina. We stayed there for the night, and we had to, you know, make sure we got motels or hotels,
right,
that, you know, accommodated pets.
With five deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq, I can't imagine a 5-day trip across country was much uphill climbing for you. So, I mean, you talk about a logistical nightmare. That always did amaze me, how we mobilize a force like that, and yeah, that's amazing. That's an amazing story, moving everything back. So you got back to the reservation, and how'd you get started? What'd you start doing first?
Well, I got back and then tried to locate somewhere to work, and you know, employment on the reservation is not too good. You know, it's mainly about what you know. It's kind of like a first come first serve, and there's not a lot of places. You know, we live in a very rural area, so employment was kind of hard. So, my brother-in-law, like I said, is in Fish and Wildlife, and he was doing a lot of hunting. So what did I do? I took the two puppies and just threw them in with his pack, and just kept on going with from there. You know, from there, my brother-in-law Titus Sandoval, who's the conservation officer here, or game warden, depending on, you know, where you are and the region you're in, however you call them.
Right.
And that's how I got started. And from there, he became my mentor, you know.
Well, Calvin, let me ask you this real quick. Do you know the background of those Walker dogs, those puppies that you got? What breeding were they?
They were, the generation goes back to the Nance line, but the mother and father were off of Boss Hoss line. And that's where they came from.
From what line again? I missed that.
The Boss Hoss.
Okay, but they went back to the Nance bred dogs.
Yes, they went. They eventually went back to where it split apart from the original Nance line.
I got you. Okay.
Yeah. So, you know, I just and then employment came along with the community college here that we have on the reservation as a security officer. So I jumped on board over there, and I used that at night, and worked at night. And during the day, I started working with the dogs, going out hunting, and my brother-in-law is the one that introduced me to all this hunting, deer.
Well, how did your brother-in-law get started in hounds, and what type of hounds did he have?
Oh man, I mean that's I can give you a brief story, I guess, of him, and he's a game warden / conservation officer, depending on how.
Oh no, not another game warden in this story.
Yes, sir. So he got started because he had lots of depredation calls, and he didn't have dogs at the time, so he was forced to sit in corrals late at night with a flashlight, and his partners. They would sit in a corral and wait for either that mountain lion or that bear to come back, and they pretty much put a spotlight on that animal, and then make sure that that animal was there to hurt the livestock, and then they would put that animal down. And so after a couple of more depredation calls that they had to go on, this guy he was telling me that there had to have been an easier way to do this, to where he stays safe and he's not sitting in the dark just waiting for one of these big game predators to come back.
Yeah, being lion bait and bear bait.
Yeah, pretty much.
Did he rub any fish oil or anything on himself, hoping that those?
Maybe I can introduce you to him on social media, and you can talk him on to doing one of these interviews on your podcast here for the Navajo Nation, as far as the game warden side of the aspects on the reservation. So
I'd love to talk to this guy.
So his partner at the time bought some dogs off of a gentleman out in Utah, and that's how they kind of got started. I'm not too sure, of the bloodlines or whatnot or any of that, but it was mainly, they just got puppies, and what they do, they really didn't have, the GPS collars, and so what they did was just, recast the dogs without no collars, and spent countless hours, yelling, screaming for the dogs, and the dogs, went silent on them. They, screamed and screamed. So eventually he bought collars and kept on going from there. When I got back, my brother-in-law had about 6 hound dogs, and I'm not too sure about the bloodlines or any of that. They were all mixed. Majority of the best dog that he started off with was a black and tan named Jibs, and from there he bred him to another dog named Lucy, who was a blue tick walker cross, I think it was, mm-hmm. And that's how his line came out. And for a lot of big game, since they're not big on, for me anyway, what I see is they're not big on bloodlines or paper trail. I mean, I don't know. That's just how it is majority of the time out this way.
Well, I think, Calvin, Calvin, I think what you're saying there is pretty typical across the country. As I meet big game hunters, in my own experience in West Virginia, hunting with my dad, most of our friends hunted crossbred dogs. I've done articles for Bear Hunting Magazine about legendary bear dogs, and many of those dogs have been crossbred. So, and when you mentioned the black and tan crossed with the walker or the blue tick, that seems to be a pretty good combination and typical across the country.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot of really good dry ground dogs here in Arizona that I know of. They're mixed with just about everything. just about every type of hound dog that you can think of, and then now what I kind of got into is I met up with Gary and I got some of his line.
Let's talk about that a little bit, Calvin, because that's where we wanted to go. I mean, you ended up partnering or working for, I'm not even sure how to describe your relationship with Gary. He's described it very well in a previous podcast, but how did you get hooked up with Gary Robertson from Carnivore TV? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, I think it was that first year in 2015. My brother-in-law was telling me, he's like, "Hey, you want to go see some elk?" And I was like, "Yeah, I want to." I was like, "Okay, let's go see some elk." I've never really seen elk on the Navajo reservation, so he was like, "Yeah, I know a field that they like to go into this time of the year." So we went out and we drove some back roads.
What time would this have been, Calvin?
This would have been right in the fall season, maybe in September time frame.
Yep.
And we're driving way back in there. We had a couple of hound dogs with us. Rico, Nos, we had them with us, and saw this little silver ranger, and then Titus goes, "Hey, that's Gary." He goes, "I know this guy. He has a TV show. He's a TV show named Carnivore TV." And
right. Yep.
That was the first time I seen Gary. Was way in the back roads on the western part of the reservation, way back in there, and they were trailing the mountain line. And I kind of stayed back, and Titus went up there and talked to them and whatnot. So we just left them alone.
Were they filming at the time? Were they filming an episode at the time, Calvin?
Yeah, they were. Anytime Gary comes onto the reservation, they always film an episode either of, trailing cats or coyote calling coyotes. So they were trailing a cat, and I guess the cat had done several loops on them, and they had made a loose a couple of times. So they were there trying to figure that out, and then we pushed forward to.
So your involvement kind of took off from there with Gary.
Yeah.
I know in the episode of the TV show, he found out your background.
Several days later, Titus asked me again, and he goes, "Hey, you want to go take Gary out to go coyote calling?" So we met up with Gary at the local gas station here, and we started going out from there, and coyote calling and whatnot, and then we introduced each other, and I told him about my background, and then I had a small DSLR camera at the time, and that's what I was using to film with, and Gary had seen a lot of the footage that I had taken, and he's like, "You know what? Let me get you a camera, and then you can film for us, and then we'll go from there."
And you had taken a photography and video class, is that correct? Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I went back to college for a little bit, and I took some classes for photography there at the community college, and just to better understand the camera and the aspects of how to shoot. And I took some film appreciation classes, which introduced me to how to properly use lighting, do interviews, and the different parts, the different reasons why you shoot things at certain angles. So that's what the classes that I took, and that's how I kind of got really big into filming. And then of course I wanted to film these hunts because just to film these hunts, because the electronics and hunting I kind of like those two things. So I kind of made sure.
And if anybody
them together, that's what I did.
If anybody follows you on Instagram or Facebook, the quality of your photos is outstanding. That's the first thing I noticed about some of the shots that you take. Is you can tell there's some creativity and some cinematography that goes along with that stuff, and the way you set your photos up I can tell that you take a lot of pride in the way you photograph animals and wildlife and also hunting situations. So Gary recognized some of that talent and knew that you would be available there in the Navajo Nation to help him when he's out there. Is that right?
Yeah. So right now I'm working with them full time. I'm one of the cameramen here. So all my hunts, all the stuff that I do here, all the filming and shooting that I do here, they come out, and either that or I put it on the hard drive and I mail it back to them. They scrub and look at all the footage, and then they, put together 2 or 3 shows, and then we do an interview sitting down with one another and refilm and talk about all these shows. Matter of fact, Mr. Gary Robinson is out here right now. I'm going to meet up with him later on this evening. They're out coyote calling right now, so we're going to be, putting together this coming season's episode today, tomorrow, and I believe Friday. So we're going to be out here shooting the next couple of days. So
nice.
It's going to be pretty interesting.
Steve, you got something?
Well, I've been particularly interested in your photography.
Yeah.
When I was in the Air Force, I, like a lot of GIs, and got to Japan, I picked up a 35 millimeter camera because they were inexpensive and you could buy the good ones over there for not many bucks. And I went through some courses while I was there and so forth. And photography really helped me throughout the years of my career, particularly involving dogs and working with dog magazines. But the cinematography and shooting video and something is really kind of eluded me and something I'm interested in. I got a question for you. Maybe our listeners would find interesting. If a guy wants to get out and shoot some decent video of his hunts with his hounds, and I realize that drones are popular now and so forth, what's the initial investment? How can a guy get just a grassroots setup to go out and shoot some of the things? I realize as a photographer, the eye is so important. You've got to see the shot. You've got to know what you're doing, and obviously you do. But just for our listeners, what would a basic setup to get some decent memories of our hunts cost a guy?
It all depends on, it pretty much depends on your, how do I say this? It all depends on your income, how much you're willing to spend, Right now, they've come up with some amazing cameras, action cameras. The GoPros have just incredible stabilization now. And that'd be one to use for, as a beginning hunter to start filming his hunt. GoPros are pretty popular and they're fairly inexpensive. They're not too bad. And then DSLR cameras at the same time, they're pretty nice too. As long as I shoot a Nikon myself, and I have just the stock lenses on them, which is a 80 to 200 millimeter lens on it, just so I can zoom in as close as I can without breaking the bank. And that's what I use. And of course the camera that Gary furnished for me to use to shoot on carnivore TV, of course, is another one that I use. But for a beginning individual to start filming their hunt, I'd probably recommend like a GoPro, and then also a cheap camera. Any of the cameras from the DSLRs from Walmart would do the trick, because a lot of them right now you can shoot film and at the same time take great pictures with them. And then it's just knowing your camera. After that, you can shoot raw footage, which is the best way to shoot, because you can edit those, and the information that put back on the pictures is just incredible.
I agree. Good information for sure.
Well, Steve, you've certainly taken your share of high quality photos over the years, and Calvin, I don't know if you realize this or not, but Steve actually has years and years and years of photographs that are cataloged, and if you ever need a picture of a dog in your any of your dog's pedigrees, you would want to reach out to Steve, because he's probably got a picture of it somewhere, because he's talked to those people. So, Steve, did you have anything else on photography, or?
Well, no, I actually, because of our relationship over the years with the folks at Garmin, when I bought an action camera similar to the GoPro, I bought the Garmin Verb, and I've been able to get some good footage on that and all. But I realized that GoPro, they were the first in the market and certainly the most popular. But that's good advice, Calvin. And I hope to get a better grade video camera as we progress along this podcasting trail. And I'll be talking to you later on about some tips and so forth. But do you use drones at all in your photography?
No, I don't. I eventually, I want to go that route, and just to introduce more of that whole, aspect of cinematography, and drones is the way to go to introduce that, nice shot of, telling a better storyline in the footage that I try to, produce, as far as, on Facebook and whatnot, the little video clips, the 6 to 10 to 15-minute video clips that I put together of each hunt that I go on.
You're going to see Gary here in a little bit. You might want to drop that on him.
Yeah. I'll do that. Other than that, I get my dogs year round here. Lion season here goes from October 1st to June 31st, and that takes up a huge chunk of the year. And then, of course, I've got the spring bear hunt that starts May 11th to June 2nd, and then I go back to lion season all the way to June 31st.
Yeah. So.
And then
So I've got a question and kind of a progression here. I want to kind of work through here, Calvin. So you started shooting footage for Gary for Carnivore. How did Rez Hounds? How did that come about? I mean, how did you get in the outfitting business? How did you, what pushed you into that? Which one came first? It's kind of a chicken or the egg thing here. Which one was first, and how did Rez Hounds develop?
Well, Rez Hounds kind of developed right about the same, a little bit after I met up with Gary.
Uh-huh.
I started running the dogs with my brother-in-law, and it took me 2 years before I could, build up the confidence to be, to think, hey, I think I can do this. I think I can do this to not make a living, but to, bring in some extra money to pay the food bill for dogs, the gas, the wear and tear on the truck.
Right.
And my brother-in-law is actually the one that pushed me on it. He's like, hey, you could be a guide and do this and get paid for it. I mean, you're going to do it anyway. You're having fun doing it anyway. You might as well see if you can get a couple of clients and get paid for it, and then that money you can put back towards the dogs. So I was like, you know what? I'll think about that. So 2 years went by until the third year. I finally decided, I think I can do this. So I put together the logo. I put together, I started putting all this footage online through Facebook, and then, through that is how I started somewhat getting popular. And of course, it started getting even more popular when Gary, started introducing me on Carnivore TV and putting my name out there as far as, either cameraman or last season we did, I think it's 3 shows together with me in it. And that from there, it just kind of expanded. And, social media is huge these days and trying to get your name out there. So that's how it happened. We were able to, through the Navajo through Fish and Wildlife, was able to, meet the guys from Bone Collectors and do a couple of shows with Bone Collectors. And then they recommended, I don't know if you know the other show, Interlock Out There. So we did a TV show with them again. And then just this past winter season, Bone Collectors came back out, and we were able to do another show with them.
So you,
in a way,
I'm looking at your.
Big.
Go ahead, Calvin. Finish that up. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, in a way that's how that the snowball effect started. It started with this little idea of me being just a small time guide here on the reservation to run hounds, and then Gary came and involved, and the snowball got a little bit bigger, and ended up doing the TV shows with these other people. It's just snowballing bigger and bigger, and now I started working with Sportsmen for Heroes, doing volunteering my time for veterans and taking them out hunting and stuff like that. So it's a process. I stay busy. I don't think there's ever a time that I'm not busy, because like my wife says to me all the time, she gets mad. Your kids, you need to go quiet down your kids again. You're spending more time with your kids, and by kids she's referring to the dogs.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking at your Facebook profile right now, and you got 4,856 followers. So you're doing something right out there with Rez Hounds. Typically, if somebody wants to come and hunt with you, Calvin, I always wanted to ask an outfitter this question: what makes a good client? You get a guy call you, says, "Hey, I want to come and hunt with you. I'm willing to pay you to take me hunting," and then what expectation do you have of your clients to come and hunt with you on the Navajo Nation? Talk to us about the conditions you're hunting in and things like that too. But what's your expectation of a guy that's going to come and hunt with you?
It's basically to be open-minded. He's not going to get the big. I reassure them that you'll definitely see, either depending on what you hire me for, either bears or mountain lions. You'll definitely see animals, but I can't. I tell them you have to be open-minded, and you can't expect to have cats as big as in British Columbia. 200 plus cats. That's a rare sight to see, especially down here in Arizona. Even cats further in Utah and especially in Montana are definitely bigger than cats here in Arizona. On average, maybe an average tom may weigh between 115 and maybe 135 on average here. Anything bigger than that is extremely rare, and I make sure that they understand that, if they want that, they got to go, looking further north where, these cats have, evolved to be bigger than dry.
That's just a standard biological thing. You go farther up into the as you increase in latitude going up the map there. It's true with everything. Deer are bigger, predators are bigger. Everything is bigger in the north, and the terrain you're hunting in down there is very challenging. And what happens when a hunter shows up and is not prepared to put that many miles in? Because you're putting miles and miles and miles on these dogs and on yourself. So what can a hunter do to prepare himself? He's going to pay you money, and you're going to do your part. What do they need to do their part to be able to enjoy this hunt? They need to get on a Stairmaster, put a pack on, start training for the marathon. What they got to do?
Well, first thing, I'd make sure make sure that they're aware of the elevation. Starting elevation where I live is 7,000 feet. At the top of the mountain, you could be right around between 9 and 9,500 feet in elevation. And at times, if we can't make it up to the top of the mountain and those dogs trail from the base all the way to the top, we're going for an extremely long walk. And, keep telling them, you have to walk, you have to exercise, you have to make sure that, you condition your body to ensure that you can get up there. And, I just tell them, hey, if that animal's treed, those dogs will keep it in a tree. It's up to us to make sure that we get up there. If it's us taking our time, we're going to take our time because those dogs will keep it up there. But we just need to make sure, you need to make sure that you're in somewhat of decent shape, better than you are right now, to make sure that we can get up there. I'm going to, I tell them, I'm going to make sure that I do my best to get us as close as possible. But, the longest that I've walked is, I believe, 1.5 miles to get to the dogs.
Yeah.
And that was with like a foot and a half of snow.
And people don't think about snow in northern Arizona, but watching your videos and stuff, that's what you're hunting in. Tell us a little bit about the Rez Hounds, the Hounds of Rez Hounds. I mean, what are you looking for in your dogs, and what kind of unique terrain are they hunting in, and what special characteristics do they have to have in order to be able to be successful in where you're hunting there in the Navajo Nation?
Well, the main thing is endurance and the ability to use their nose. Like I tell a lot of people, I'm not colorblind. I'm interested in that dog's nose, not the color of the dog. The color of the dog is just a plus. If he looks nice and uses his nose, hey, that's a win for me. But if he's the ugliest hound dog you've ever seen in the world, but his nose works really good, he's gonna stay with me. And I'm not too picky on bloodlines. If it works, it works. Mainly, I like to keep the dogs starting from pups between now until they're about 2 years old. And from 1.5 years to 2 years old is when I like to, make sure that I see some sort of, progression in the right direction as far as them, grinding out a track and listening and, just being obedient. I run at least, right now I'm running nine dogs. And if I can't control those 9 dogs, it's going to be a nightmare for me. Just like having them break from the tree, I need to make sure that, if I tell them break from the tree, they're going to leave that tree and follow me, because I'm not going to carry, 4 or 5 leads and to tie them all up and drag them off of that tree while that bear is still in the air or that lion's still in the air. I'm not going to do that. I need to make sure that they listen to me and that they all get along at the same time,
Well, Calvin, which do you prefer to hunt? Do you prefer bear to lion or vice versa? And do you think that it requires a different type or style of dog for each?
Yeah. I prefer to chase cats all day, any day. If I'm hunting for bears and I see a mountain lion track and I got a tag in my pocket, that bear tag's gonna take a back seat and I'm gonna go after that cat track. I enjoy chasing cats a lot better. It's more, to me, my opinion, it's more of a challenge, not only for me but for the dogs as well, because they have to grind out that track. The mountain lions don't leave a lot of scent. They leave, depending on the pad, maybe anywhere between 4 to 6 inches in diameter of scent on the ground. And that's pretty much it. So those dogs have to work for it. My ultimate goal is to be a dry land cat hunter. That's my ultimate goal as far as what I'm trying to work towards. And granted, I'm new to the game. I've only been doing this for 5 years, and I still have so much to learn. And I'm nowhere near to say that I'm the best, or nor will I ever say I'm the best. With dogs, you're always learning. They're always constantly teaching you something. If you've learned everything that you need to learn, then it's just not fun no more. So,
Have you read some of the books about the old lion hunters in the West, like the Lee brothers or the Slash Ranch Hounds? Any of those writers that have written so many terrific stories about lion hunting with hounds on dry ground? Have you read any of those, Calvin?
No, to be honest with you, no, I haven't. Usually, I spend a lot of my time with the dogs or
Sure.
in the mountains. I really don't.
Right.
I really don't. And then
Well,
when I get home, either I get into the shower and go to work, or I just go straight to bed. So.
Sure. Well, the reason I bring that up is, as I listen to you talk, it conjures up visions of those stories that I've read, and I have had the opportunity to hunt in the West. And early on, you mentioned the fact that the cats are smaller, the lions are smaller there maybe than in the northern part of the country. When I hunted the White Mountain Apache around Pine Tops and that area of Arizona, the genetics there of the bears produce large skulls and large feet and so forth, but not necessarily large animals. Is that typical in the area you hunt? Do these lions score pretty good in Boone and Crockett, or are they just overall smaller?
It depends. This past winter, that client that I had from Missouri, his cat, the green scored just shy of the one of the all-time records by I think a quarter of an inch, I believe it was. That was the green score.
Yeah.
And it all varies, though. I mean, if we have a good winter season and a good spring season as far as water, the antlers grow and you get bigger bucks. The same thing with cats. If there's more game, they get the bigger they get, and it all depends on everything else. Everything runs in a circle. So the more game we have, the bigger the cats are. But the problem with that is that the less deer and the less elk we have. So there's just got to be that equilibrium on all parts.
Well, it's no doubt a tough place for any type of wildlife to eke out a living down there in the Southwest. Whether you're a deer, a peccary, or a mountain lion, I mean, you got to earn every meal and every breath. That's for sure. Especially when you have guys like you out there chasing them around and putting them in trees. So, Calvin, where can people find you on? Where can people find you on social media, and do you have a website?
Yeah, website, no. Social media is Rez Hounds on Facebook, and then on Instagram it is Rez Hounds 16. That's on my Instagram username. So those are the only two that I really go off of. And then of course, if anybody wants to talk, I'm always open to Messenger, or on Facebook has my number as well, and you can text me at any time, and I'm more than happy. Like I said, I work nights, so sometimes I'm up at work. I'm usually messaging somebody, talking about hounds at 2-3 o'clock in the morning. So
yeah, and you've always jumped right in and messaged me back every time, so I know the response is quick. And before we wrap it up, there are a couple other things that we wanted to talk about real quick. And Steve, I'm going to let you take over on this part of it and start wrapping it up.
Well, Calvin, talking about your Rez Hounds, and I want to make sure that our listeners understand that that's REZ. And I assume that's short for reservation. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Right. Okay. I just wonder about your hounds. Do you have a strict breeding program that you follow, or do you always go outside for pups to replenish your pack? What do you do about keeping this line the dogs going?
Well, right now, to be honest with you, all the males are the females that we either had fixed or, they just didn't make it through the season. So lately what I've been doing is, going out and outsourcing. I don't really, like I said, I'm not particular on any breed of hounds. So I'll look into somebody that's, got hounds for sale, and I'll go that route. And if that bloodline don't work, then that bloodline don't work. If it works, it stays. And I'm not, I don't praise any one bloodline. That's not me, and that's not who I am. I'm just in it for the nose. It works, it stays.
Well, how much research do you do, or you just pretty much rely on trial and error? I mean, do you try to seek out a dog that's producing puppies with a cold nose, or do you say, well, I'll try this and see how it works out?
Pretty much. That's kind of how I work, because I'm not too big on the whole, pedigree portion of it. There are people that have decent or really good dry land dogs, but they sometimes they just want an arm and a leg for those dogs or even those pups. And I'm not really too big on purchasing pups that are in the thousands of dollars to get there. I'll get there eventually. It's just on my terms and take my time, and I'll rather take a pup that's maybe $300 and work with that dog for the next 2 years and see what it see the outcome. You may, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, you may have the two best dryland dogs in the world, but there's no guarantee to say that all of the pups out of that litter are going to be just as good. So, I mean...
Well, what's the basic protocol you put a puppy through, Calvin, to get him started, where you can introduce him into the pack and he be a successful lion or bear dog?
Well, I'll start off with taking that pup with me on every adventure that we go on to, starting at about, the 12-week mark, and dog's tree, I'll take that pup with me, and then that pup will follow me to the tree, and it'll just stay the entire time. It'll just be with me to either walk into the tree, or when I free cast all the dogs, I'll let that pup, trail and follow all the rest of the dogs and just learn off of the older ones.
Well, Calvin, out here in the East, we have these go yonder coon dogs that some guys typically, they turn them loose at the truck and they have no hope of ever putting their hands on that dog until they pull it off of a tree. You, on the other hand, are saying that you take this pack of dogs, 6 or more, and you have them under voice command, and they are, and you can call them off the tree. You don't basically use leashes, I would suppose, unless maybe you do tie them at the tree. How do you instill that kind of handle in your hounds?
It's just straight discipline. You're the leader of the pack, and they need to know that what you say goes. And from the start, it was like that. It was hard to take the dogs off of the tree. And eventually, me working with them and toning them and telling them, break. As soon as I, start off with like toning them, tone them and then tell them break. And then they would slowly learn. And then, of course, you got some of the hard-headed ones that wouldn't break. And then you take the shock with that one. So, and then they would learn, hey, break means come to me and leave the tree alone. And eventually, I got the finished dogs to do what I wanted. And then the younger pups, as I introduced to them, when I tell them break and the finished dogs would come to me, the pups would, break from the tree too, because they're like, oh, okay, well, these guys are going with that command. I'm going to go follow them. So it's kind of like a monkey see, monkey do type of deal. Like as I like right now when I start introducing them. So.
Well, I've seen your videos. I've seen your videos, Calvin. It's amazing. I've seen you call those dogs off of a bear tree from across a small canyon, and they break off of there and they come running back to you. It seems to be a trend in the Western Houndsman. We had Ross Feenster on here, and he talked about having their dogs under voice command. Larry Anderson, I hunted with him up in Swan Valley, and every dog he had was controllable by voice command. He didn't lead 5 dogs through waist-deep snow back to the truck. He just told them we're done and pack it in and headed back. So, and that was even after, leaving animals in the tree that they're looking at. So I think we undersell what the capabilities of these hounds are and what their trainability is so many times. And it's really foreign to people in the East to think about being able to have a handle on a hound like that. Whereas for you, it's pretty much a necessity. I've seen where you hunt and you're walking down trails on the edge of cliffs and different things, and you get a dog that's not under control or on a leash and lunges, and you lose your balance and you're dragging yourself and maybe 4 or 5 hounds with you over the edge if you've got them coupled up on a leash.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I'll testify that I can control my dog. I guess it came with older age or whatever, but I've been long been a proponent of putting a handle on a pup at an early age, and I enjoy the fact that I can make them heel with me back to the truck, or I can call them off a tree, or call them across one of these miserable Florida swamps. So it can be done,
right?
But it's just great to see the Western Houndsman, as Chris has said, handling their dogs in that way. And I think that goes back as long as the tradition of hound hunting has been out there, with some of the people I've mentioned before, is that having those dogs that actually work with you instead of the other way around, it has been pretty much the MO of the Western Houndsman. And I think we could learn a lot out here for sure.
One of the things that's kind of pushing Eastern Houndsman, or has pushed Eastern Houndsman to try, to work towards a better handle, is that, we're so heavy in competition hunting back here. You've got a time limit to recover your hounds if timeout is called. So with the Garmins and the electronic training systems and stuff, guys are spending a lot more time on recall because you pay $6,500 for an entry to a competition hunt. You don't want to get scratched because you can't get your hands on a dog. So some of that's starting to take off, and I'm seeing more of that nowadays than what I used to.
Wow. I don't know anything about the competition aspects of hound hunting. That's over my head. That's something that I don't even go near, because it's all brand new to me. I was going to go to the one here in Arizona. They had it just, I think, about 3 weeks ago. I was going to head over there and just to see what it was all about and meet other houndsmen, but I kind of got caught up with work, so I wasn't able to make it to the one here in Arizona.
Calvin, you need to make plans to come back east here, and I'll host you on Labor Day weekend for Autumn Oaks. It's like the holy grail of hound hunting. If you just would not even be able to wrap your mind around how many hounds, how many hound-related products, how many houndsmen are walking around the grounds at Autumn Oaks. And because it's back east, a lot of Western hunters aren't exposed to it. But it's kind of like a pilgrimage for a houndsman to go to Autumn Oaks and see this. To me, the first time I went to Autumn Oaks, it was like the first time I went to Disney World. I walked in the gates, and it's like, wow. My eyes lit up. I'm all wound up. I didn't know which way to go first. I didn't know whether to go to Space Mountain or go to the Pirates of the Caribbean first. It's the same way when I get to Autumn Oaks. Where do I go first? And everybody that's a major breeder and has well-established hound lines, you can learn so much from walking around the grounds and just spending a little bit of time with those people. And Steve was very involved in that program for a number of years, and he was around that business all the time. So just as we are intrigued by what goes on the Navajo Nation, and I would encourage you to come back and see what hound sports are like in the East. And I've got the setup for you to be here. So anytime you want to come back out here, then you're more than welcome.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to do that. I wouldn't mind going to, what'd you say it was called, Autumn Oaks?
Autumn Oaks, yep. It is the holy grail of coonhound events when it comes to vendors and houndsmen on the grounds. Steve, how many people usually attend Autumn Oaks annually?
Chris, since they don't, well, I think recently they've started charging a gate to get in. In the years that I managed it for 16 years when I was with the UKC. We did not have a gate charge, so we weren't able to accurately estimate the crowd. But I would say easily in the neighborhood, probably on Saturday of the event, 5,000 to 10,000 people, thousands of hounds. It really is a gathering. It's held, actually, it's Labor Day weekend each year, and in Indiana, which is pretty much a central location for the coonhound sport out here. And while I was there, I coined a phrase, the event where history is made, and they still use that. And it really is where many of the famous dogs down through the history of coon hunting have earned that fame. And they have an elaborate award ceremony on Sunday morning where the winners are honored and presented with all kinds of awards and prizes. And I think Chris and I have talked about, we will probably have the Houndsman XP booth at Autumn Oaks this year and be doing some live podcasting there. And man, it would be great to have you out there. Any person that loves hounds would love Autumn Oaks, if nothing more than just look at some of the most beautiful animals you've ever seen.
I would like to interview Calvin after he's been at Autumn Oaks for a couple hours and get his take on. I can just imagine grabbing a kid off a Space Mountain the first time to Disney World and say, "What do you think of that?" and trying to capture that emotion, because as big as you are into hounds, Calvin, I know that you would enjoy it. You could fly right into Cincinnati. I could pick you up at the airport and it'd just be an hour and a half ride up there. So.
You know what, Chris? I'm just thinking, though, the first time, and I've yet to do this, that I would walk under a lion tree with a pack of hounds under it. I bet my eyes will be bigger than Calvin's would be when he comes to Autumn Oaks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Steve,
man, you did.
Go ahead, Calvin. Finish that up. Go ahead and put a concluder in there.
Yeah, I got a couple of stories where I actually, the dogs treed on another tree. I got there. I got to the tree, and you can see, the scratch marks on the tree going up where the cat went up. That cat bailed off onto another tree, went down the tree, and ran towards me, and went up a tree right before I got there. So I got to the tree where the dogs were at, and I was like, "What is going on? Cat was here. Where did it go?" So I did big old circles, and the dogs were, opening up, and they were just bawling, going. And I was like, "Where is this cat at? He's around here somewhere." I stopped, looked up. Yep, no dogs were near me, but that cat was sitting right above me, maybe 5 feet above my head, and I was like, yeah, that's not where I want to be right now. There has been a couple of times where that has happened. So.
Yeah, it's definitely a spiritual experience when you have a lion sitting just out of reach, and people are always asking me when they see my pictures, they're like, "How high was that lion? And does the lion ever come out?" And I've seen bears skin them, bark down a tree right over your head, and bailing off the side of the tree 7 or 8 feet up and launching straight out over the dogs and taking off again. So it's definitely a spiritual experience. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
I'll have to tell you some stories about my dad's episodes with bears.
Yeah.
crawling into a culvert and poking it with a stick so it'll go out the other side. And just some things like that he used to do to frighten me beyond words when I was a kid.
Yeah. Well, we better wrap this thing up. We're over an hour and 15 minutes now. Not like we have a time limit, but you got any concluders, Calvin? One more time, tell us where we can find you on social media and get in touch with. We want to encourage our listeners to go out and make contact with Calvin and Rez Hounds and book a hunt with you, because you're hunting some outstanding, just amazing country out there.
Yeah. You can find me on Facebook underneath of Rez Hounds. It's RezHounds. And then on Instagram, the same thing, Rez Hounds, but add 16 to it, because that's the year that I actually, made the logo and started, my outfitting business. And my phone number is 928-785-7247. Majority of the time, if I don't pick up the phone, I usually answer back with text. So if you want to get a hold of me pretty quick, just text me your name, number, and any questions you may have. I may not have the answer, but, I'll get back to you with some sort of, answer.
Well, one thing I can say, I can definitely substantiate that, Calvin. I think I talked to you the first time I was actually out hunting, and you were feeding dogs at the time, and you stopped what you were doing. But the amazing thing that always impressed me about you, Calvin, was the fact that you were humble about everything, and you're always willing to help people, and of course your military service there. But I want to share a real quick story before we wrap this up, and I think it reflects what kind of person you are. I talked to you about whether or not we really wanted to talk about where you hunt. It seems to be taboo in the hunting world right now to share locations or anything like that, because people will come in and hunt your spots or whatever. But you may not even remember this conversation, but I asked you, I said, are you ever worried about, sharing where you hunt and then having a bunch of people in there hunting? And your response was, if I get beat to a spot, then I need to look at what I did that day. I need to get up earlier. I need to work harder. So that was an amazing thing that here we are on Navajo Nation, a sovereign nation that belongs, I say it belongs to you, and your response was, no, it belongs to everyone. Do you have any
Yeah,
thoughts?
that's exactly right. If you have a hunting permit, then you're allowed to go exactly where I am. Your rights are exactly the same as mine. So you beat me to my favorite spot or the hunting hole that I like to hunt. Hey, by all means, have at it. And tomorrow I'll definitely probably beat you to that spot.
Oh man, I love that. Because back here, we're mostly private property, and it just seems like, guys try to respect that, but guys will get upset if somebody's hunting their spots, even on national forest back here. That in my eyes, we all belong there. But there's certain times when I'm worried about getting my tires slashed or my windshield broken out because I don't know who else hunts there. And I just thought the way you look at that on the Navajo Nation is just absolutely it's outstanding. I can't say enough about the ethics and the character that goes with that, and I'm sure that has a lot to do with your culture as a Navajo, the land belonging to all of us. Is that accurate?
Yeah, pretty much. If you visit almost majority of any elderly around here, the first thing they'll do is invite you into their house and try to make you feel as comfortable as possible.
Amazing.
That is a heritage right there, Calvin. That's something to be treasured and something that we can all learn from and hopefully pass along to our children. Your culture is amazing. Your story is amazing. I am so pleased that Chris made the contact with you and that we were able to have this visit today. And I am hopeful, very hopeful, that someday I'll be able to follow those Rez Hounds and see that lion up a tree. It'll be a great day for me for sure. Calvin, we really appreciate you being on with us today. We wish you the best of success with your guiding business. Keep up the great photography. We'll be watching Carnivore TV and any other spots that your work's going to be appearing. And we just hope that you'll be able to continue this great tradition of hunting with hounds for many, many years to come. We really appreciate you, brother.
Yep, I appreciate it too. Thank you. And it's been an interesting conversation. And thank you guys for the opportunity to be on your podcast. It's been something that, since I first seen it, interested in. And it's not every day that you get to hear other houndsmen talk hounds, especially out here on the Navajo reservation, because there's only 3 guides that have dogs here on the reservation, and the other 2 live off the reservation. So majority of the time it's just me up in the mountains with the 10 dogs that I have. So
yeah, well,
it's boring talking to myself. So.
Well, Calvin, I want to echo everything Steve said, having you on, and we've got a big project in the works with you. We're not going to reveal that yet, but our listeners need to stay tuned for some big announcements that we're working on for a project with Rez Hounds and some other players. So we definitely want to stay tuned for that, but it's time to sign this thing off. Steve, you've got the final word.
Chris, as I've said many times, in the words of a bear hunting friend from good old West Virginia, friend, you follow your hound and I'll follow mine.